Well, we're back. Another great week. We are ready to go. We have been out of it for a little while. I don't know why the podcast hasn't been posting as much, but we really need to get back into it. Of course, some of you know, most of you may not. This is the Locked Loop podcast. I'm your host, Isaiah, your game master, streamer, video game enthusiast. Of course, we're here this week to talk about the Game Awards. Now, the Game Awards haven't happened yet. And we're doing this on purpose because we want to talk about the nominees. Because there has been some stuff with these nominees that we really need to go over. Now, the contenders, there are contenders, the ones that don't belong there, and those that do belong there. Of course, that is what we're here to talk about. Again, I'm your host, Isaiah, and welcome to Locked Loot. It has been a hot minute, and we are happy to get back into it. Of course, we're live on Twitch, usually on Saturdays, which is where we will be from now on. It will, of course, be posted everywhere else. But if you're watching the archive, go ahead and just let me know in the comments what you think should win Game of the Year this year, because there is a huge discussion around what should win, what shouldn't win. Or tell me about the ones you think got snubbed. Now, let's talk about the Game Awards. The thing about the Game Awards is there is a partial voting system, but it also is part of a council system, which means there are games on here that we don't believe belong on here. And what makes something Game of the Year material is, of course, the culmination of everything that it is, from gameplay mechanics, storytelling, and the emotional impact of an amazing story. Think God of War Ragnarok. Think Red Dead Redemption. I think God of War Ragnarok took it that year over Red Dead Redemption. Think Elden Ring. The innovation, the things you can do with different mechanics, the amazing visuals you can get from like the realism of Call of Duty to the animated fun of some of the indie games that we have, and the stylized decisions that we can get. Of course, what it all comes down to, and the biggest thing that I think Game of the Year needs to come down to, is reception. How were these games received? Did the community love it? Did the developers love it? Did the critics love it? Did the haters still go, it's a good game, I'll give you that? Now, we're going to be talking about a couple of the background games. The ones that won before, not background, sorry, the previous Game of the Years. It has been a while since I've been on the podcast. I'm a native fast talker, and I commonly tend to just go from thing to thing to thing to thing, and then sometimes I misspeak, and I try to correct myself, but that doesn't always happen. Yell at me in the comments, or yell at me in chat, whichever you want to do. Now, when I'm talking about previous winners, if you notice I kind of look to the side every once in a while, it's because I have 3 screens. First one is showing what you guys show. Side, I've got some other stuff going. Elden Ring. Now, we're not talking Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, which is on Game of the Year this year, and I have thoughts about it. We will get to it later. It won in 2022. It won Game of the Year in 2022. It deserved Game of the Year 2022. Elden Ring had great graphics, excellent gameplay, iterated upon the FromSoft formula, great writing, of course. When we look at 2023, we have to give it to the eternal, the potential game of the decade, Baldur's Gate 3. From amazing acting to amazing storytelling to the graphics to bringing D&D to the game sphere again and making it a more mainstream thing. We can all now don't need to find a party. We can go play some Baldur's Gate, and of course the mod support after it. We will get into Baldur's Gate because it is here again. There are a number of winners It Takes Two won Game of the Awards in 2021. So there isn't this one type of game that wins Game of the Year. It Takes Two and Baldur's Gate 3, and Elden Ring, not Shadow of the Erdtree, are three very different games, and they all have what's in common. Their gameplay mechanics work really well into each other. The gameplay is fluid. It can be difficult. It can be turn-based. It can be puzzles. Their storytelling, whether it be the cryptic storytelling of FromSoft to the beautiful, emotional, and diversified storytelling of Baldur's Gate 3, not to mention the amazing emotional storytelling of God of War Ragnarok. They all have that in common. You want to hit these beats. Great gameplay, great storytelling, great innovative or iterative. I'm not saying that the game has to be revolutionary. Baldur's Gate is just D&D. Elden Ring, Dark Souls. It's a Souls-like. So it has a lot of Dark Souls mechanics into it, but it iterated. It doesn't need to be innovative, but it should be iterative. Visual and audio design. Does that music pop? When you hear the music of Baldur's Gate, do you go, oh yes, I still use it in my D&D campaigns. When you hear the boss music of Elden Ring, are you intimidated by the foe in front of you? And when those emotional moments come and that swelling music behind you, do you cry with Atreus and with Kratos? Visual and audio design play into those. There's a lot of blocking. There's a lot of directing and cutscenes. And of course, did the players enjoy it? They share almost all of these things. Past Game of the Year share all of these things. All of the parts play into each other. Of course, you can take parts out. You can go, maybe it doesn't have the best music, but its visuals are on point. Maybe the storytelling ain't there, but the game is fun to play. Now, this year's different. This year is really weird for Game of the Year. So I have it up here. We have, of course, our Game of the Year nominations are Astrobot, Bulletro, Black Myth Wukong, Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and Metaphor ReFantasia. Now, the fact that Bulletro's on here, which is essentially a poker indie game, a type of roguelike poker indie game, that's impressive that it's Game of the Year. Now, I don't know if that speaks to the lack of Game of the Year material or that speaks to just how good this game is, because I haven't played it. It's a mobile game. I just haven't had time between all my other stuff. I'll get to it sometime, and maybe it'll change my mind. I do think, like, hey, it must be good enough to belong here if it's got those things. Great gameplay. We know poker. Storytelling. I don't know how you tell a story in poker, but if it does, that's fine. Innovation. It's poker. And I think it has some innovation in the poker. I kept saying innovation. I also mean iteration. If it's iterated on the iterated. I'm going iterated. On the poker game play style, then yeah. Visual and audio design, it can have some good music. The visuals, well, it's poker. You're not going to get too many visuals. And I guess the players loved it. That's what matters the most, I think. Players love the game. I think players really need to love the game. Astrobot, on that list, it is a great VR game. I'm so glad to see a VR game on this list. Black Myth Wukong, we had some controversy around it, but it's a solid game. It's got good graphics, good storytelling. It's got these things. It's iterative on the Souls-like formula. You've got Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree. This one's hard. I said we'd talk about Shadow of the Erdtree, and I'll talk about it when I talk about each one individually later kind of when I discuss these things, but what they did differently this year is that Shadow of the Erdtree is a DLC. The fact that a DLC is up for the Game of the Year is so peculiar because this is not a new game. Sure, it may have all these storytelling elements added onto it, but it's not Elden Ring 2. It might be the size of a game, but by that logic, there are other games that should also have been on the list. I don't know how I feel about Elden Ring being on this list. Elden Ring's great. People love it. I'm not a Souls-like person. I can play Souls-likes, but it's good that people loved Shadow of the Erdtree. People were hyped for Shadow of the Erdtree. And when it came out, everything, I just don't know if it belongs on a Game of the Year because Elden Ring came out in 2022. So technically this is a 2022 game fighting for Game of the Year 2024, which feels weird. Of course, then you have Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. This is another one where I'm like, I don't know if it belongs here because the criteria must have shifted in the last few years because it's not a sequel. It's a remake. We have a DLC and a remake on the list here. And that feels very peculiar and very difficult to come across because I'm like, hard to tell. So I'll give it to them. They changed up the formula. It's innovative upon the Final Fantasy formula. It is not the same as Final Fantasy VII. I believe they added active time combat systems like they did in Final Fantasy 16. And people loved it. It's got the Final Fantasy visual and audio design. The gameplay mechanics are Final Fantasy. Storytelling, Final Fantasy VII already had an amazing story to it. And then, of course, we got Metaphor ReFantasia, which is another Sony game. I've seen some interesting things about it. I haven't played it just because I haven't had time. Once again, gameplay mechanic-wise, it blends turn-based strategy with active time action. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. That can be interesting. It seems to have a good story. Now, let's talk about the contenders. What do I think will win? Biggest thing. We'll talk about what I think will win later. We've been going through each of these. And these are all, 4 of these are major AAA games. And I'm going, okay, major AAA games versus Astrobot, which I believe is a VR title, which means it's probably not AAA, but it is also made by Sony. Boletario is an indie game. These are just so different types of games to go up against each other that I'm like, this is interesting. Like, how do people react to this? Because I don't know if Elden Ring wins this just because people believe it sets a bad precedent. And what I mean by that is this sets the precedent that DLC can win Game of the Year. Literally win Game of the Year. Not this DLC introduced new music, so it wins the music category. Not it best DLC, which honestly I think they needed to strip. And people can get mad about this. I'm all right. Defend the decisions for me because I want to see the other side of this. Please, in the comments, defend the decisions of putting Elden Ring and Final Fantasy Rebirth in here. Because I don't think remakes and I don't think DLCs belong in Game of the Year. No matter how awesome of a game. You could sweep all of the Game of the Year awards. And I still don't think a remake should win Game of the Year. Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, fantastic DLC. I think it probably has great action elements, probably great music. Like I said, I haven't heard the music from it. I know Final Fantasy's music. I think they should be competing in best music, maybe best performance, best DLC and best remake. You need to have those separate categories so that we're not stuck with this where we're going, okay, is a DLC really a Game of the Year? Can a game win Game of the Year every year? Because what's to stop something from making a fantastic DLC for a game every single year? And now that DLC is nominated Game of the Year every year. and it just takes that title. What's to stop Elden Ring from making another DLC next year, or the year after, or the year after? What's to stop Square Enix from doing Final Fantasy VIII Rebirth, Final Fantasy IX Rebirth, Final Fantasy X Rebirth, 10-2 Rebirth, 11, 12, 13, 14, 6, 5, 4. What's to stop them from just flooding Game of the Year with remakes? Other than like development. I don't believe that it is good for the industry to have this happen. Honestly, I do not believe it's the good of the industry for this. It's wrong. I firmly believe this is wrong to have DLCs and remakes in here. I complained a little bit about the Silent Hill Rebirth, the Silent Hill remake, and the Resident Evil remake. But it's getting out of hand now that we're looking at DLCs. Those two games took places of games that actually deserved it. What games actually deserved it is hard to say. Because this year has had some heavy hitters and some underperformers. Now, we got to talk about Boletario for being an amazing indie game. We got to nominate Astrobot, and of course, another VR title, Arkham, the Batman VR title, which I believe is in Best VR. I think Astrobot loses to it, but the fact that VR titles are coming out of their own category and we're seeing VR titles stepping up into actual games is a great sign for the industry. It means we're taking a step forward. The console wars may become the VR wars. As VR games start to as VR tech starts to get more powerful, as VR games start to get more popular, I think we'll see more and more of that take over. And I'm like, I want to see that. I want to see the next iteration of gaming, which I honestly believe is VR or AR, step into that and really take up those mantle. And of course, seeing games like the Arkham series take that up. And I did not have high hopes for the Arkham game. I had no high hopes for the Arkham game at all. I honestly thought it would be terrible, but it's great. I've seen the videos of it. I've seen the gameplay. It looks good. And I'm like, yes, this is what you can do if you actually put some effort into it. Because VR, I hate to say it, VR is kind of like a place where low budget devs can go and throw a bunch of trash games without people noticing. So being able to go from that into we're getting Astrobot. We're getting Batman Arkham Shadows, I think is what it's called. The fact that those are winning, I'm like, yes, it means that things are stepping out. Predictions. My top 3 picks: Black Myth Wukong, Metaphor ReFantazio. And I hate to say it because in my heart, I know it's wrong. In my soul, I know it's wrong. My top picks: Metaphor, Black Myth Wukong, Final Fantasy VII. Fight me. Now, here's why. Metaphor ReFantazio is a great game. It's standing on its own 2 legs. It is its own IP. It's a new IP. It's nothing being built upon older IPs, which means we finally got something new, something good that's stepping into the ring. Final Fantasy VII, man, this could have been a cash grab remake, and it wasn't. This could have been such a cash grab remake. I say that because they could have just reskinned it and been like, it's Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. We updated graphics. We updated animations. Don't you think it looks cool, kids? No, they went through and remade the game completely. Redid the music, redid the character designs, redid everything. Combat is so much different in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth than in Final Fantasy VII, you know? So I'm going, like, they did an actual job. If this was not a Final Fantasy game, specifically Final Fantasy VII, if they did Final Fantasy 18 as good as Final Fantasy VII, I'd be like, yes, definitely. In my heart, I know it's wrong, but Final Fantasy VII is so well done. Black Myth Wukong, huge love for the game. The game looks great. The mechanics are great. And finally, we're bringing the Eastern legend, Sun Wukong, into the modern mainstream audience. I say mainstream because gaming has overtaken Hollywood and movies for market share. So definitely the mainstream stuff. Black Myth Wukong brings Sun Wukong into this. People are being introduced to this ancient mythological character that they may not have run into. They're inspiring people to read Journey to the West, one of the literary powerhouses, I would say. And so it does that. It still has amazing gameplay, varied abilities. The music's there. Again, it fits the criteria. I think other than the controversy that went along with it, about Black Myth Wukong, I think it deserves the win here. My top vote is Black Myth Wukong. I think Black Myth Wukong deserves the vote here. The reason why I didn't say Boletario, even though I'm like, it's great that this indie game stepped up, at the heart of the game, it's poker. It's iterative. Black Myth Wukong is a new IP definitely based on mythology. And it's fun. It's a fun game to play. It's a difficult game to play. It's great. And to see this game step up in this way, these Game of the Year guys, I'm like, this is a true Game of the Year experience. I'm so glad that we're finally getting it. We're not like one thing dominates. This year we're going, we actually had a bunch of good games. Who wins this? We haven't had this happen since, Red Dead Redemption 2 against Spider-Man against God of War. Yeah, we haven't had this in a while. Every year has kind of been, oh no, this is going to win. You know, when Last of Us 2 came out, I think there was a game that got snubbed. I can't remember. It was 2020. I can't remember what game got snubbed for Last of Us Part 2. 2021, we were like, oh yeah, that's going to win. 2022, we're like, Elden Ring. 2023, we're like, it doesn't matter what you're running against. Baldur's Gate wins. This year we're going, it's actually close. It's actually close. Now, I also want to talk about some games that do not belong here, no matter what people tell you. I'm just going to run through them real quick. Each of the areas, because I can tell you which games don't belong here, really. But, of course, best game direction is our big ones, because game direction matters a lot. Best narrative, of course, Metaphor, Final Fantasy. Those things definitely are only contenders. Best art direction. There's some artistically relevant. I honestly think Neva could win this because the art direction-wise, it's one of the most unique. Best score in music, it's going to go to Final Fantasy. I hate to tell you, it's Final Fantasy VII. You can't really beat that. Metaphor, it's got some great music, but Final Fantasy VII is iconic. Best audio design, again, Final Fantasy VII. The audio design for abilities, you might get Call of Duty in there. Best performance, this one's harder because, you might get the Final Fantasy VII again, but you could also see any... The best performance can go to anyone, really. Innovative accessibility. This is the only way I could see Veilguard ever getting a Game of the Year, because it does not deserve to be here. It does not... I'm wading into a mess here, and I know I'm wading into a mess here. I'm about to wade into a mess, and I'm not going to take it from the perspective you think I'm going to take it from. Dragon Age Veilguard does not belong on here. Sure, I think it could be innovative in accessibility. It might have good accessibility features. I don't know. I just know that they butchered their own story in such a terrible way that goes against so much established lore that it's like, this is barely a Dragon Age game. They completely sidelined the main villain that was supposed to be this game's villain. They completely sidelined the main villain. They completely altered the story from what it was supposed to be. Remember, this was supposed to be a follow-up to Inquisition. This was supposed to not be some different character. This was supposed to be the Inquisitor. So yeah, they fumbled it at Dragon Age. And not for the reasons you think I'd talk about, because I don't talk about the politics of the situation here. It's waded into that mess too, and it's got hurt for that. But it just has very poor storytelling to it. The game feels muddled, messy. The game does not work on a storytelling level. It betrays a lot of its own lore. And that's because the people on it did not respect the source material enough to stick with it. They did not respect Dragon Age 2, or Dragon Age Origins enough to respect the game and to respect established lore. Outlaws is kind of the same way. Outlaws wasn't a good game, but Innovation of Accessibility is the participation trophy, I would say. You made a game this year. Congrats. Games for Impact. I don't care about this. I don't know enough about it. Best ongoing. Got to give it to Helldivers 2 or Final Fantasy 14. Could be either. Best community support. Baldur's Gate, by far. Mod support, updates 1 through 7. You got to give it to Baldur's Gate. Best community support. I know Helldivers has been great on the community support since they started, pulling their head out their ass after Sony's mess up. I think the fumbles of Helldivers 2 cause it to lose to Baldur's Gate 3, because Baldur's Gate 3 has updates like 3 through 7, man. And then they announced 8 just before Game of the Year, where they're like, yeah, we're adding more subclasses and mod support. So yeah, I think Baldur's Gate takes it, which is hilarious that Baldur's Gate is going to win a Game of the Year award 2 years. And not because DLC. Best independent game. Look, Boletario is on Game of the Year. It's going to win Best Independent Game. Best debut indie game. It's going to go to Boletario again. Best mobile game. I hate to say it. It's going to go to Boletario again. Again, it is nominated for Game of the Year for a reason, and that's going to skew the vote. Best AR VR. It's going to go to Arkham Shadow. Best action game. This one's hard. Best action game, because it could go to Black Myth Wukong. I think Black Myth Wukong deserves it. Call of Duty had great multiplayer, great zombies. Helldivers 2 is Helldivers 2, and then we have Space Marine 2. The best action game is one of the hardest contenders we have seen in a long time. Out of all of these, out of all of the categories, best action game is probably the most contentious. But I think it goes to Black Myth Wukong. Best action adventure. Look, friends. Astrobot's great. Prince of Persia is a hidden gem because Ubisoft tried to bury it. Silent Hill 2 is iconic. They did good with the remake. But Zelda's on the list. I am sorry. Legend of Zelda is on the list. In the heart of hearts, I know Zelda wins this. Prince of Persia deserves this, but Zelda wins this. Best RPG. Hate to say it. It's going to go to Elden Ring or Final Fantasy VII, but it could be Metaphor. Again, those are the games up for Game of the Year. There are some contentious games. Best fighting game. No one has been talking about any of these fighting games. Marvel vs. Capcom, I didn't even know that came out. Grand Blue Fantasy, what? Don't even know what that is. Multiverses? WB tried to release a Smash Bros. Clone. Tekken 8, it's Tekken. But nobody has been talking about any fighting game except for Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. So Dragon Ball wins this. Best family game? I hate to say it, Nintendo wins this regardless. So it doesn't matter which one you pick. Nintendo wins it. I don't think Astro Boy gets it because it's not the best family game. I think either Mario Party or Echoes of Wisdom wins this. Best sim strategy? I think Manor Lord wins this for one good reason. the contenders here are Manor Lords and Frostpunk 0. I think Frostpunk is too depressing of a game, really. So I think Manor Lords takes it. Best sports and racing, I don't care. They're all the same game that came out last year. Best multiplayer, this is another contentious one. Black Ops 6 had great multiplayer, but poor matchmaking, so I don't think it makes this one. Helldivers 2, iconic. So I think it comes down to Helldivers 2 versus Space Marine. This one comes down to Helldivers 2 against Space Marine, and we all know it. There's no way Mario Party Jamboree takes it, because Mario Party is Mario Party, and it doesn't matter who you play. Somebody ends up mad. Best adaptation, it's going to go to Fallout or Arcane. Nobody watched Knuckles. I didn't even know Like a Dragon came out. Tomb Raider, I didn't even know that was a thing. It's going to go to Arcane or Fallout. Most anticipated game goes to GTA 6. It's always GTA 6. They're just farming game of the year. I don't really care about creator of the year. Best esports games, it's going to be Counter-Strike or League of Legends. And, of course, I'm not really athletes team. Yeah. Don't forget to vote. Honestly, as far as game of the year goes, it's a really fun thing. We finally got something where no one thing is going to completely sweep game of the year. No one thing is going to sweep game of the year. Which is interesting. I'm really happy on that it's not going to sweep game of the year. Nothing's going to sweep it. It's going to be contentious, which is what we want. So, my thoughts overall, I think Black Myth Wukong or Final Fantasy is going to win it. Shadow of the Erdtree may win it. I don't think Astrobot stands a chance, neither does Volatario. Just because they're more niche games. Of course, I could be wrong. Come back to this video after it releases, after Game of the Year comes out. I could be very wrong. Of course I could. And that's everything that I've got for you guys today. As far as gaming news goes. Please join us in like 20 minutes for Game Master's Arsenal. We're going to be talking about Auril, I almost called her the witch. Auril, the Frost Maiden. Of course, check us out everywhere else. If you're on the archive, hit subscribe. If you're on YouTube, you've made it this far. And if you want more, check it out. I'm your host, Isaiah. I'm logging out.